like shooting fish in a barrel for somebody who wants to steal that information, right?
The Department of Defense, the CIA, the FBI, they all get breached. You don't hear about this. Why? Because cybersecurity is not about preventing every single breach. You want to minimize them. For example, we had a family contact us at the beginning of this week, and they lost $400,000 out of a Bank of America account.
Welcome to Retirement Done Right with your hosts, David Rath and Pat Kalish, where we talk about retirement, Social Security, taxes, estate planning, wealth planning, and more. Now, on to the show.
On today's episode, we're going to talk about a very important topic, which is cybersecurity and how it specifically affects retirees and the steps that you can take to protect your digital privacy online. And for this topic, I brought in a very special guest, Mark Hurley. He's the CEO of Digital Privacy and Protection. Mark, thanks for joining. Why don't you tell everybody what you do and how you do it?
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. My firm provides a turnkey cyber protection service for the clients of wealth managers. You can't get it on your own. You got to get it through the wealth manager. You try to look us up online, you won't see much. It's run by people who helped me start it, who are ex-FBI cyber people or military cyber warfare officers. One of my partners used to run the Army cyber strategy. It's a low-cost service. It costs $35 a month. We take care of everything for you. Everything we do, you could do for yourself. But we're kind of like an online landscaping company. We can do it a lot quicker and a lot cheaper than you can do it on your own. We work with hundreds of families, but more than that, many families, hundreds of firms we work with, but many families across the U.S. and Canada. And again, our service is designed to get you to a place where you can operate safely online.
And I personally went through the service, and I consider myself fairly in the know with this type of stuff. But there were still things during the process that your tech uncovered and we remedied as part of the process. It is very intensive, time intensive from the standpoint of getting in there, sitting through the call, updating some of the things on your devices. But I like to say, what's the alternative, right? The alternative is somebody hacking into your life and stealing all of your important information.
And it doesn't really change how you operate online. The beauty of it is that all the devices and browsers, search engines, and apps that you get, they come with features that make them really safe to operate with. It's just figuring out how to turn those on and which ones you need to turn on and not. It's a lengthy process. So to get someone set up, it typically takes about 2 appointments. The first appointment, we give you a bunch of software, teach you how to use it. It's all inclusive, includes everything. And then usually a couple appointments. Sometimes we get it done in one. Then the second half is we'll get all of your accounts, get them into a password manager, reset all your passwords to lengthy, randomly generated 20, 25-digit alphanumeric passwords. And we'll also turn on 600 to 900 settings on your devices, your search engines, browsers, and apps.
And he's not overestimating those numbers. Those are actual numbers from the amount of settings that you need to change. And so for today's episode, I thought would be helpful to run through a list of the top 5 things that people can do, or you can hire Mark's firm to do so via a connection with our firm or any other wealth advisor who has partnered with them. And the steps that you can take to make sure that your information is protected online. So let's start with number 1. And I think it's the biggest one. It's using unique passwords for at least the most important sites. And that might be a distinction to dive into later on. But at the very least, you should be setting unique passwords across the board, correct?
Yeah. I mean, for starters, the way to think about operating safely online is somewhat analogous to driving a car. And you think about it, driving a car can be pretty dangerous if you don't do what you got to do. First, you got to make sure you know how to drive, and you got to understand the rules of the road and all that kind of stuff. And your car's got inflate your tires, adjust your mirrors, put your seatbelt on, et cetera. If you do that, you're fine. Internet's really the same way. And one of the things you have to keep in mind is that cyber criminals are really clever, and they're some of the earliest adopters of artificial intelligence software. So what they've figured out is how to use computers to correctly guess passwords. And a recent study found that using ChatGPT, they now can correctly guess any 8-digit alphanumeric password. Again, we're talking 8 digits with uppercase, lowercase numbers and symbols in less than 1 second. So if you're using 8-digit passwords, you might as well use password. because they're not even going to downshift. If you're using a simple password, let's say 15 digits, that's all numbers. It took the computer less than 2 seconds to guess that. The only way to have accounts that are secure anymore, because this is how fast the technology has moved, is that you need to use lengthy 20 to 25 digit, randomly generated, alphanumeric passwords. And the key word, as you touched on, is unique. They can't be similar, related, any way, shape, or form, because every time a company has a corporate data breach, the bad guys have set up their computers to grab all that information. They throw them into very sophisticated algorithms, and they generate thousands of variants of the passwords, and they hit thousands of accounts at a time. And on average, 1 million accounts get breached a week because they correctly guess the passwords.
And I think this is where we should delineate between using a simple password for, let's say, I like to use my fantasy football league. If a hacker hacks into my fantasy football league, he can add or drop some people that might upset me, but is not going to change my financial life. But the problem is if I have that same combination of username and password for my fantasy football league as I do for my bank. So they'll take the username and password and then just blast it across the internet to any sort of financial institution to see if there's a match, correct?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Here's how I think about it. Your financial accounts clearly are the most important, but also your social media, because cyber criminals have found ways to go into social media accounts and get information. They can clone voices and images. There's all kinds of things. Plus, this is what burglars use to figure out which houses to rob. It's also what child predators use to get information and target kids. So what you want to make sure is you have very sophisticated passwords on your social media accounts. You also have very sophisticated passwords on your telecom account. Because if I can get into your telecom account, everyone thinks about multi-factor authentication is a really good protection, which it is. But if they can somehow hit your bank account, well, you get sent a code that you have to put in. They can intercept the code. When I say your telecom account, what I mean is like your Verizon account or your AT&T account. Because the way a cell phone or where the cell towers know where to send the cell message to, it's based on a thing called a SIM card. Now, it used to be when you got your phone, you had this little copper piece that was put into your device, and that copper piece was used. You would change it when you changed your phone. Unfortunately, the cyber criminals find out a way to copy these things just by walking past you. So the companies came up with electronic SIM cards. So what the criminals are doing now is they're hacking into the telecom accounts and diverting the cell phones. The other accounts you got to be really careful about is your email account. And we've seen a whole series of attacks where millions of dollars have been stolen, where they got both into the email account and the telecom account, and they use that to get into the financial account. And let me give you just a real simple example. If you have an email account, and I can get into it somehow, even if you've done all the other stuff you need to do to protect yourself, what I would do if I was a criminal is go to your bank account or go to your custodial account and click on the forgot password link. And guess what they're going to do? They're going to send me a reset link. Okay? Now, there's a way to protect against that. And what you should have is a pay-for-service private email that is, it's not one of these free ones because the bad guys can find them easy with AI software. But it costs like $10 a month. And you use this in your financial accounts solely for account recovery purposes. In other words, within your account, you can have one email for daily use, and there's another place to put an account recovery email. And this is the one that you use if someone hits the reset password link, and it's not easy for them to find and very, very hard for them to access. Otherwise, even if you do everything else, they can get around all this stuff.
And that ties into the number 2 on our list, which is first, how do you remember all the passwords? And then how do you add that extra layer of security to the forgot password situation? And so using a password manager, there's a few of them out there on the market. I know that you guys prefer one. And also having that private email account set up as your recovery email, just in case there is a situation where they get your username and password for the bank, and then use that to say, I forgot my password. And then that 2-factor is all for naught, right?
Yeah. And also if they got into your telecom account, they could capture the 2-factor message. So you're right. Look, password managers, there are several good ones out there, but you got to do your homework. And a couple rules. Don't get the cheapest one. And the reason is if you actually dig through all the documents and the disclosures, these companies are collecting and selling your information. And as one of the things we emphasize in the classes that we teach is that if I can breach your cyber privacy, I can find a way to breach your cybersecurity. So number one, these are the one we recommend is Keeper. We don't have any deal with them, but it's very easy to use. The average age of our clients is 70. So this is not necessarily for technophiles. And what you want to do is you want to set it up so you have a lengthy pass code to get into it. Best way to do that is to get a verse from a song you like, and then put a few symbols and numbers in it. That's where you can get a 20-digit password, remember. But it's vital you write it down and put it in a safe, because otherwise you aren't going to remember it. But once you get your password manager set up, you got all your accounts in there, and if you reset your passwords, life is easy, because all you got to remember is the passcode to get in. You open it up, you click on the account you want to go to. 85, 90% of the time, it autofills all the fields, and you're in. Painless.
And there is sometimes a little bit of a disconnect where that it might not pop up immediately upon you going to a site, and there's the browser extension, so it just should autofill, and it's very, very user-friendly. Sometimes there are some workarounds that need to take place, but for the most part, it is very easy to use. As you mentioned, The average age of your client is 70 years old. It's right up front. You just click on the username and password and then autofill from there.
Yeah, and we set it up for our clients on their cell phones because they use facial recognition to get into it, so they don't even have to put the passcode in. And if for some reason that doesn't autofill, you just push on the copy password and paste it in. I said this on the class we did for some of your colleagues the other day, but I have a girlfriend who's a partner in a big accounting firm, and she's told me she's not sure she's keeping me, but she is never getting rid of the password manager, because once you get set up, it's so much easy. Life is so simple. You're secure, really easy to use.
And I want to know your opinion, because we mentioned the telecom stuff. Is there a preference between using a text message via SMS or like just a simple text message to your phone versus some of the authenticator apps out there? Do you prefer one or the other?
Yeah, I mean, it's good to have multi-factor authentication, period, just because it makes it more complicated for the bad guys. But none of these things are silver bullets. It used to be, MFA was perfect because they could never get into your phone. Well, now they can get into your phone. Authenticator apps came out about 5 years ago, and they were going to be the rage. We wouldn't need to worry about passwords because you have an app on your phone with a random number generator that's unique to you. And so you had to put that code in that came up at that time. And what's problematic is there's this thing called malware, computer viruses. And every day somewhere in the world, there's a bad guy writing a new computer virus, and there's a good guy writing an antivirus. And sometimes the good guys win, sometimes the bad guys win. Literally, about a month after they came out with the authenticator apps, malware came out that breaches the authenticator apps. So again, the key to doing is setting it up so you're doing like 3 or 4 things to get into your account as opposed to 1 or 2. And to be sure, the bad guys are innovating very quickly. And for example, we think with the advancement of quantum computing, which is Microsoft, Apple, and Google have announced chips that are going to accelerate this, that we won't be using 20-digit alphanumeric passwords in 5 years. We'll be using 50 digits. And some accounts, we may have to use 2 passwords just because the technology is moving so quickly. But for now, relax. Just get these passwords taken care of. Get some technology to help you with this. And that part of the problem is solved.
And this is something that got brought up during my onboarding process. And essentially, your goal is not to 100% bulletproof somebody's financial life online or their presence online, because it's really not possible. If somebody really wants to get into your account, they're going to be able to with the proper tools and techniques. The challenge or the thing that you're trying to accomplish is just to make it hard for that person, and then you're going to shift to somebody easier. So I like to make the analogy to the joke that says you don't have to outrun the bear, you have to outrun the slowest person in your group, right? And that's really what you're trying to do.
Precisely. In fact, the Department of Defense, the CIA, the FBI, they all get breached. You don't hear about this. Why? Because cybersecurity is not about preventing every single breach. You want to minimize them, but also making it so even if they breach you, they have to get 2 or 3 other things to steal something of value. Sort of think of it as building a 4-walled fort around yourself. And just because they get over one wall doesn't mean they're not getting over the next wall, which doesn't mean they're not getting over the next wall. And as you clearly and so astutely pointed out, the bad guys, most of their attacks are automated using software. And they hit you in a couple different ways. And if they can't get around that, they just go on to the next person. Now, granted, if you're someone like Ray Dalio, who is worth like $50 billion, a good friend of mine runs his cybersecurity, it's worth spending a lot of money and a lot of time trying to get to Ray. But for the average family, if you just take the basic steps they move on to somebody else. We call it making yourself ugly to cyber criminals.
Yeah, increase the level of difficulty. They move on to some easy
Amount
targets.
of resources, just not worth the time and effort. Plus, 99% of the world, just nothing.
So number 3 on our list, because we kind of rolled numbers 1 and 2 together, number 3 is going to be privacy and security systems settings on different apps, search engines, and browsers. Do you mind expanding on that for a second?
Absolutely. Apps are great. The problem is that the fundamental economic model of most of the companies who provide them to you is to collect your information and export it to them on an ongoing basis and then sell it to advertisers. Now, the problem with that, of course, is the criminals have figured out how to get the same information. So if you're operating online and using an app or search engine or browser and you're not turning on all the various privacy and security settings, and these are existing features. It's not like creating anything new. You just have to find them and turn them on. Bad guys have access to staggering amounts of information. I'll give you a simple example. Social media accounts. A recent study found that 4 out of 5 home burglaries, the bad guys go in and use unprotected social media accounts. And when I say unprotected, they didn't hack into the account. The person just didn't put on the privacy settings. And they can go in, and there's about 5 or 6 different ways they can figure out where you're at any time. And they use that to figure out which houses to hit and when to rob them. More scarily, child predators regularly go into parents' and grandparents' accounts and get a lot of information about kids who they target online. So this is more than just protecting your money. It's a combination of cybersecurity and cyber privacy. And the only way to protect your cyber privacy is that if you're going to use a device, search engine, browser app, you got to turn all the security settings and all the privacy settings on. Now, it's a little challenging a bit because certain apps collect so much information and make so much money, they put a lot of settings you got to turn on. For example, Meta has about 80 settings. LinkedIn has 119. Amazon's got 37. But if you don't turn these on, it's almost like putting a neon sign on you saying, come get me. And remember, they're coming after using AI. It's very easy for the bad guys if you don't turn this stuff on.
I've heard it said that if the service is free, guess what? You are the product, right?
That's absolutely right. And again, they don't want to get sued. So they give you the ability to opt out of all this stuff. But boy, they make it complicated. The other catch too is they don't like it when you turn these settings on. Because, Meta makes $60 billion a year collecting and selling your info. And if I was making $60 billion, I'd like to keep making that. So about once a year, they change the settings. So what we're talking about here is not a one-time thing. On an ongoing basis, you have to keep going back in and resetting these things. Well, the way to think of it is you need to get set up once and get all these settings on. And then about a year later, you come back in and spend a fair amount of time getting reset up again too, because they quickly get out of date otherwise.
Now, those were specific to search engines, browsers, social media sites. But let's also talk about like device-specific settings, Apple, Windows, things like that.
Yeah. Look, the devices are great, and they're designed to be really secure. But again, the companies have the same conflict that they make all this money collecting and selling your information. So a byproduct of it is that nearly every device, when it comes to you, it's set up so that it automatically records in about 5 different places your user IDs and passwords. Now, you may not be able to find them, but criminals can. So if a criminal can get into your device, they can very, very quickly take that information, grab all your passwords, and loot your accounts. I'll give you 2 recent examples of this. There's an alert out from the FBI on what are called shoulder surfing gangs. And these are people, you're going to a bar or restaurant, you're not paying attention, somebody looks over your shoulder, you put the passcode into the device, and another person distracts you, they steal the device. There was a gang that was arrested recently that was stealing over $50,000 an hour by doing this because they know how to get into the device, grab the passwords, and loot the accounts. I was even talking to an advisor who had a client who was down in Chile, and he was walking along on a vacation, pulled out his iPhone, put his passcode in, and a guy on a motorcycle came up and grabbed it. And within a half hour, they cleaned out the accounts. All right, how do you prevent this? There's about 60 settings on an Apple device. There's about 120 on a Windows or an Android device that you got to turn on. And there's all kinds of great security features, too, that come there that just aren't turned on. For example, an iPhone, you can automatically encrypt your online backup at night, which means if someone got into your home network or something like that, they can't just grab all your information because they'd be encrypted. If you don't and someone's in your network, you're basically just unloading your information on them. They can steal everything from you. That's one button to turn on. A MacBook comes with a firewall that's not turned on. On a typical laptop, your Bluetooth is automatically turned on. If you don't turn that off as part of the security settings, if I'm within, say, 9 rows from you on an airplane, or if I'm in a coffee shop with you or in a hotel lobby, I can just look into your device and steal your information.
And one thing that I was not aware of, and this can be number 4 on our list, is using a VPN. So first, what is a VPN? Second, when should people use it or turn it on, turn it off? Like, what are the most important times to have a VPN?
Yeah, a VPN is a virtual private network, which is a fancy way of saying software that automatically encrypts your online traffic. Now, we recommend Surfshark. Again, I don't bargain with these guys. We just did our homework. British Virgin Islands company. It has the highest level of security. Very, 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 very easy to use. The way it works is when you connect to the web, it connects through this. And effectively, you're going through separate servers, not their servers. And it makes you anonymous, and it automatically encrypts what you do. Now, why is this so important? If you ever use public Wi-Fi, or for that matter, any network, anyone on the network can see what you're doing on your device. That's how networks are set up. And so what cyber criminals will do, either at your home network or public Wi-Fi, is they'll hack into the network, and they can set their computers up so they automatically copy all the passwords and user IDs as you put them in. For example, we had a family contact us at the beginning of this week, and they lost $400,000 out of a Bank of America account. And what had happened, we think, it's always like a diagnosis of exclusion. You can't quite figure out what happened. You have to work your way through based on what you see. We think the person had accessed their account using public Wi-Fi on the cell phone at a conference. And somebody copied the password, and then they sold it to criminals offshore. The criminals came in and set up the app and then put in a bunch of recurring payments and stole all this money. So how do you prevent this? Again, you get this software, you put it on, it automatically encrypts you. Now, word of caution though, VPNs are really good at making you safe, but they can make it difficult for you to connect to certain accounts. That's because the companies don't like it when you come in this way because they can't get your information. And so you've got to get a VPN that has either you know how to turn on and turn off so you can connect to the site and turn it back on. Or in the case of Surfshark, it comes with a pause button. So what you do is you open it up, push pause, it'll turn on for 5 minutes, you connect, and you're in. This is the only really noticeable difference we find if you do all these steps in how you operate online versus before. The biggest single bit of complaints we get is that, oh, geez, I have trouble all the time with these certain accounts. And we say, yeah, okay, just remember, pause the thing, it'll be fine, you can connect, and you can get in. Otherwise, you really can't, just turning settings on your apps, search engines, browsers, devices, you literally will not see any difference in operating online.
And I think this whenever I'm at a large event and the public Wi-Fi is there, accessible, no passcode required. You think about the amount of people who are at that same event using that same Wi-Fi. It is like shooting fish in a barrel for somebody who wants to steal that information, right?
Yeah, there's even guys who've set up hotspots at places that don't have free Wi-Fi and said, hotel free Wi-Fi. And then literally intentionally to get people to use it so they can copy all their passwords. So you never, ever use public Wi-Fi unless you're encrypting your online traffic. Otherwise, you might as well just start, sending out announcements of what your passwords are.
And that brings us to number 5 here, which is kind of a catch-all, but just as important as the first 4. And that's staying up to date on all this stuff and continually monitoring any changes that are occurring, using your firm to help along the process, but staying up to date and consistently adjusting to whatever the times are calling for.
Yeah, I teach classes every year to different clients about, you give updated classes all the time. And the class I'm teaching this year is almost 70% different than the class I taught last year. Not because, we missed anything. It's that there's been that much innovation. A good example, you may have heard of a thing called deep fakes. They're now able to clone your voice and image using AI software, and it'll defeat voice recognition software. And a family on the East Coast, they were using this for one of their accounts, and someone cloned their voice and image and stole $2 million out of a retirement account. Okay, a year ago, we wouldn't even talked about this. They have things called phishing attacks where they'll pose as people. And what they'll do, unless you've protected your cyber privacy, putting all these settings on, all the stuff we're talking about, and more importantly, keeping them current so they stay current and effective, they'll use AI software to profile you. And then when they meet with you, when they contact you, they'll be able to very quickly convince you they're legitimate because they'll know so much about you, about your advisor, so much about whoever you're working with, and get you to do something where they can steal a lot of money from you. The way to think of this is that you have to set it up so you automatically patch all of your apps. Your antivirus is set up so it's automatically updating constantly. Your operating system's constantly updating. And at least once a year, you have to go in front to back, soup to nuts, completely update. Now, if there's ever a problem, it does not get better with time. It gets geometrically worse. The average breach of a company, the bad guys are in there for 9 days before they are discovered. It's not any different than hit individuals. They'll come in and they'll sit and wait and figure out ways to steal from you 20 or 30 different ways. And just because they hit you in one way, that doesn't mean they're not going to do the other ways. How do you prevent that? The minute there's a breach, you've got to get on it. You've got to overcompensate, take a host of various measures to protect yourself. You have to assume a lot of things have been compromised. We just were called in by a family that lost a lot of money because they hacked into the email account and stole a wire transfer by changing a couple numbers in it. And we found that 19 passwords have been compromised. So we had to go reset every single password, had to turn all the different settings on, had to get the device wiped. I mean, it really is case specific, but if you don't respond, it does not get better. It gets geometrically worse. So the people lose millions and millions of dollars, it's because they wait.
And I was introduced to your firm via an unfortunate situation from an advisor friend of mine who had not done anything quote unquote incorrect, like click on a phishing email or do something that she shouldn't have been doing. And they still were able to attack her personal information, start to withdraw money from her bank account. And your firm, I think, was able to step in and help with some of the cleanup. And that's really where
that's how we met.
Step one is protecting yourself.
Stop the bleeding. That's the first step. I mean, she lost $30,000, this poor person. And again, the minute you think there's a problem, you got to be on it instantly because these guys are unbelievably clever in how they do this. The thing that worries me most is that we're now for the first time starting to see onshore gangs, people who are regular guys that would rob 7-Elevens or liquor stores, are starting to use cyber tactics. And we've had them actually make contact with some of the people they're targeting. I had a lady in New York, older woman, who was a friend of a friend, who the friend called me going, you got to help this person. She'd been contacted by her bank, had told her the bank account was about to get cleaned out. She needed to get her money out, and then they would send representatives over to escort her to the bank to set up a new account. But she had to take the money out first. And he says, well, I can't have that much cash. He says, well, buy some gold coins and put it instead. So she grabbed a lot of money, bought a bunch of gold coins, and that's when her friend called us. We called the police because the bad guys were literally coming to her house to rob her. Okay, and we had to get him to take them to take her to the bank. We had to get policemen to guard her. I mean, it used to be we think of these offshore criminals, these bad guys, as some person in Thailand or China doing this. The local guys are doing this now, and they're very slick. They know a lot about you. They know a lot about how to push your buttons, and it's gone from just money being at risk to also your physical safety.
And this is one of those issues that it doesn't seem urgent until it's too late. And so people who are listening, this isn't meant to be a scare tactic of a podcast, but it does highlight the importance of protecting yourself so that you don't become an attractive target for a cyber criminal. Because as you said, there is a proliferation now of people using these tactics. The tactics are only getting better, more sophisticated. You need to stay one step ahead and to the point where you become a less attractive target. And I always like to think, imagine if these people had applied their smarts to something else, maybe worthwhile, and they wouldn't be cyber criminals. But they're constantly evolving the ways that they go about stealing people's money, stealing people's privacy. And it is I think you wrote a paper about this called "Welcome to the Jungle," right? Where It is a jungle out there, and you need to protect yourself. You need to protect your family because at some point it's going to be too late, and you're going to wish that you did.
Yeah, and don't get panicked. Okay, it's not hard to do what I've talked about, but it's critical that you do that. You got to turn on all these settings, devices, search engines, browsers, and apps. You've got to make sure you use some, you need some technology to help you do this. You got to use some very sophisticated passwords, password manager, a virtual private network, a private email, and then you got to update this stuff on an ongoing basis. Most families have some family member who's the techno nerd. The person probably can do it for you. If not, we work with families all over the US and Canada. We can actually do it cheaper than you can on your own because we buy the technology in bulk. And we can do it probably a lot quicker. But regardless, just do it. Take care of your family.
Yeah. As I said earlier, what's the alternative? If you end up in a situation where you're compromised, you're going to wish you went through these steps. So we laid out a lot of information today. Mark and his company, they help with that through financial advisors. So you have to be a client of a financial advisor in order to have access to Mark's service. We're going to start working on getting our firm signed up so that our clients can have access to that. And I think it's really important what you're doing because it is such an important issue that's going around. And unfortunately, it's only going to get worse. So, Mark, I really appreciate you taking the time to go through these steps today. Is there anything else that you'd like to leave with our listeners?
Yeah, what I'd like to say is that keep in mind, cybercrime is now bigger than the sale of illegal drugs. Okay? We all think of watching on TV, drugs, narcos, all that kind of stuff. This is so much bigger. It's a $10.5 trillion business. So the question isn't whether you're going to get caught up in this. The question is are you going to take the steps to protect yourself so it doesn't become a problem? Or are you going to wait till afterwards? We like to say before or after. Are you going to do this either before something bad happens or after? The smarter way is just do something before.
Well, thanks again for joining. I hope everybody found some value in here. If you have any questions, reach out to me. I can connect you with Mark. This is something that we wanted to get out there because it is such an important topic. So thanks again, Mark.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Retirement Done Right. To learn more, visit us at contwealth.com.